was working this dead-end job. Minimum wage, same routine every single day. Clock in, clock out. Go home, eat something cheap, watch some TV, sleep, repeat. Nothing ever changed. I was 31 years old and I had exactly $412 in my checking account. I remember the number because I used to stare at it on my phone before bed like it was going to magically grow overnight. It never did. I wasn't lazy. I want to be clear about that. I worked. I showed up on time. I did what I was told. I was polite to customers. But the system, the actual math of it, just didn't add up. My rent was going up every year. My paycheck wasn't. And one morning I sat in my car in the parking lot before my shift, looked at my bank notification, and something just broke loose inside me. I thought, there has to be another way. And then, slowly, over a few weeks, an idea started forming. And I know how it sounds. Trust me, I've had a lot of time to think about how it sounds. But hear me out, because what I did was not some guy with a color printer and a pair of scissors. This was precision. This was research. I spent the better part of 8 months reading government documents, Treasury Department publications, Federal Reserve white papers. They post everything online, you know? Exactly how the paper fiber is sourced, the ink composition, the magnetic properties, the security threads, the color-shifting foil, the micro-printing along the borders. They publish it to educate the public about how to spot counterfeits. And I read every single word of it like it was a textbook. I set up shop in my garage outside of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing that would raise flags from the outside. Just a regular 2-car garage in a regular neighborhood. I ordered equipment in pieces from at least a dozen different suppliers, spread across several months, paying cash wherever I could. I learned paper chemistry from scratch, the cotton linen blend that real currency uses, the color-shifting ink that goes from green to black depending on the angle, the exact typeface for the serial numbers, the feel, because the feel is everything. People don't look at money carefully, but they touch it, they fold it, and if it doesn't feel right, something in your brain flags it before you even know why. It took 14 months before I printed a single bill that I was satisfied with. 14 months. I destroyed probably 2,000 test prints, each one slightly better than the last. I was obsessive about it. I'd hold my bills up next to real ones under different lights, different angles. I'd run my thumbnail across the surface to check the texture of the engraving. I got a UV light, a magnetic ink detector, one of those counterfeit pens. I tested my own bills, over and over, until the pen said nothing, until the detector said nothing, until I said, okay, this is it. The first real-world test? I drove to a gas station in Dayton, far enough from home that nobody knew my face. I bought a Snickers bar and a bottle of water with a fake 20. The cashier picked it up, held it to the light for maybe 3 seconds, and handed me change. $16 and some cents in real money, back in my hand. I walked to my car, sat down, and just stared at the steering wheel. For a long time. I felt sick. I felt incredible. I felt terrified. I drove home doing exactly the speed limit the entire way. But here's the thing. I was never going to be the guy walking around spending fake bills at gas stations. That's amateur hour. That's how you get caught on a Tuesday for $40. I had a completely different model in mind. I was going to be a wholesaler. I started making contact, carefully, indirectly, with people who moved in certain circles, people who needed untraceable cash and weren't going to ask too many questions about where it came from. Criminals, yes. But I told myself, their problem, not mine. I priced it at $30 for every 100 in fake bills. 30 cents on the dollar. You buy 100,000 in counterfeit hundreds. You pay me 30,000 in clean cash. The margin on my end was extraordinary. In just under 2 years, I moved over. $200 million in counterfeit currency. $200 million. I want you to sit with that number for a second. That's what the federal indictment said, not what I'm claiming. That's the government's number. And the quality of the product? The Secret Service later told federal investigators they had never encountered anything at that level outside of a state-sponsored operation. Banks in Cincinnati, Louisville, Indianapolis, they were running my bills through their counting machines, their UV scanners, their magnetic ink detectors, and the machines were reporting authentic, 4 customers, 4 clean transactions, cash on delivery, no drama, no complications. I thought I had built something airtight. I thought about expanding. I thought about retirement. Honestly, I had more real money coming in than I'd ever imagined earning. I bought a nicer car. Paid cash, obviously. I moved into a better apartment. Told people I was doing freelance consulting. Nobody asked follow-up questions. The 5th customer reached out through the same channels as the others. We set up a meeting in a parking garage in Columbus. He showed up wearing a plain gray hoodie, jeans, beat-up sneakers. Normal. Relaxed. Nothing about him read as wrong. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. He knew the terminology, knew the process, didn't ask anything suspicious. We completed the exchange, $300,000 in fake hundreds for $90,000 in real money. He counted his stack, I counted mine. He shook my hand and said he'd be in touch for a larger order next time. 48 hours later, at 5:17 in the morning, my front door came off its hinges. 14 federal agents in body armor. I was standing in my kitchen in boxers and a t-shirt, holding a cup of coffee, and the next thing I knew, there were flashlights in my face and someone was reading me my rights. They had everything: the printing press, the paper stock, the ink reserves, the specialized equipment, and $63 million in finished, ready-to-distribute bills I hadn't moved yet. All of it, right there in the garage. I sat at my kitchen table in handcuffs and watched them carry it out, box by box. I didn't say a word. The charges were serious. 60 years. That's what the U.S. Attorney's Office was looking at. Counterfeiting, distribution of counterfeit currency, conspiracy. My first attorney was a public defender, a young guy who was clearly overwhelmed. I fired him within a week and paid for a real criminal defense attorney out of the clean money I'd been setting aside. That turned out to be the best $30,000 I ever spent. Here's where the story takes a turn. During the investigation, the Secret Service forensic team was working backwards, tracking where the bills had surfaced, cross-referencing serial numbers, building a picture of the full scope of distribution. They accounted for approximately $200 million, but I had told my attorney, quietly, in a privileged conversation, that there was a second cache, $250 million in finished, undetected notes sitting in 3 storage units across 2 states, Indiana and Southern Illinois. Climate-controlled, locked completely off the radar. My attorney brought that information to the federal prosecutors, not the location, just the existence, and he let them think about what it would mean if that cash ever entered circulation. Think about it from their position. Bills that passed every automated check, every UV scan, every magnetic ink test, 250 million of them, in people's wallets, in cash registers, in bank vaults, in ATMs from Chicago to Atlanta. The economic damage would be nearly impossible to contain. You can't pull bills out of circulation when you can't identify them. That leverage changed everything. The prosecutors wanted those bills. They wanted them badly enough to deal. I agreed to give up all 3 locations in exchange for a dramatically reduced sentence. Full cooperation, complete surrender of all remaining counterfeit currency and equipment, a detailed statement about methods and distribution channels. My sentence, 6 months. 6 months in a federal minimum security facility outside of Indianapolis. I served my time, completed my supervised release, and paid fines that amounted to a fraction of what I'd made. And here I am, sitting across from you, telling you this story. Do I regret it? I regret the 5th customer. Everything else, the research, the craft, the system I built, I can't honestly say I regret any of it. What I built was remarkable in a twisted way. What I regret is underestimating the reach of a federal undercover operation. The 5th customer was a Secret Service agent who had been building a case for 4 months before we ever met. I walked right into it, 60 years down to 6 months. You do the math. Some people call it luck. Some people call it a technicality. I call it understanding, precisely and completely, what the United States government is most afraid of, and using that fear as your only bargaining chip. One shot. It worked.